Hello and welcome to The Dive, your YouTube weekly show that seeks to unpack matters making headlines and political issues with Mark Bichachi and me, Murani Gigi. A lot has happened since we last filmed the show, but I think what has stood out over the past couple of days is the death of former President, His Excellency, the late President Mwai Kibaki, who took over in 2002 after the late former President, His Excellency Daniel Arap Moi. I am curious, Mark, because he came in after 24 years of His Excellency the late Daniel Arap Moi's reign. I'm curious as to what the mood, the vibe, the energy was the day that he became president. Where were you? You know how old I was when he became president?
1 year old.
2 years old. I was 2 years old when he became president. So I know you are older than me, so I'm curious. What was it like? Describe the day for me.
Well, I can tell you for free that some of us, I remember I was driving my mom's car at the time and we drove, shouting out of the car like Kibaki as well. It was the most ecstatic election I think I've ever seen in my life. I think the only election that in my mind compares to the kind of election I saw in the country is probably the election of Nana Addo in Ghana, which I happened to witness. I think there was some similar energy, but Kenya's was much higher. And the reason it was higher is not just because of 24 years of Moi. A lot of people forget you've got to add another 14, 15 years of Jomo Kenyatta and Kanu. So it was a combined 24 plus 15, so 39 years of Kanu rule. And so Kanu had finally fallen, and Kanu at the time represented corruption, it represented a stagnant economy, it represented the taking away of our rights to freedom to speech, it represented the dying of hopes because it had gotten to a point in the Kanu regime where they promised roads, there would never be a road, there was never, if the government said they were going to do something, no one took them seriously. How nowadays they demarcate and they destroy a building to say they're going to build a road there. No. When they said they'll build a road, where the road reserve was, we would build an estate. That's how bad things had gotten. So Mwai Kibaki's win represented a lot of hope for the country, but also, and a lot of people forget, it is an election where we couldn't even fight each other because Kikuyus voted for him. Kalenjins were also part of the mix. Luyas, Kambas, Luos. It was such a huge win for the country. Only won by 67%, which is a landslide in modern democratic terms. So yes, it was an ecstatic, euphoric moment, something that sticks to my memory to date. And the excitement lasted for quite a while, because I remember when I traveled to South Africa, Kalonzo Musyoka came, because he was Minister of Foreign Affairs. He came to South Africa, and I'm telling you, the number of us who went to this hotel to meet him, not because he was coming to say anything, but because we were excited. Kenya had finally gotten a new system, a new presidency. It was ecstatic. I'm sure at 2 years old you felt it.
I didn't feel it at 2 years old. It's funny because I became aware of politics when I think I turned 13. And even at 13 years old in boarding school, talking about politics and siasa, everyone's looking at you like...
And that's really the crisis of our times. Because a lot of people in your generation have no clue what a good leader is, to be honest. If you look at how they treat the likes of Sonko with his impeachment, how they react to issues of corruption, how they react to a presidential candidate who has live and active corruption cases, tells us that these young people do not connect as we do to the impact of corruption and grant corruption at that scale. You did go to Goldenberg, and when people, like right now, the trending thing is that prices have gone up. My friend, in 1990, between 1990, 92 to 94, the price of things went up 5 times. We had inflation of almost 400-500% between those 2 years. That's something that's unprecedented. But because this generation that is coming of age now, it has grown up in an environment where roads are being built, the railway was expanded, refurbished, and things like that. They no longer look at development the way we did. If you look at Kibaki's regime, you don't find young people complaining and saying Kenya is not changing. Because what we knew is if the road is going to be built, then my job is to look for a shamba or to look for a place where I can put a shop and boost my business. So we looked at development infrastructure as what the government needed to do so that we could plug in. Now the government is building roads. Now the government has trains. We're talking about BRT in Nairobi, and the young people are saying, oh my God, please just drop food directly to my mouth. I do not want to think. And I know they'll be very angry at me at this, but it is not the government's job to create jobs. It is the government's job to create an environment where jobs can be created, and that's just the bottom line. You can't do it. I saw someone today complaining that Hilton has shut down. Hilton was a crap hotel compared to all the new hotels that have come up. Pan-Afric, which is as old as Hilton, has refurbished its rooms. It looks better. Serena has done the same thing. You cannot remain in 1986 in 2022 and then you want to blame the government that your business failed. No, business does not just require government to create an able environment. You as a businessman have to do the right thing. So I think there needs to be a paradigm shift unless we want to make Kenya a welfare economy, which is what the wheelbarrow is promising, and I'm totally against it, by the way. You know, this idea that you want to sit at home, the government has built roads, created infrastructure, and created all of these nice things for you to use, then all you want to complain is because there is no truck delivering food outside your door. Come on, it's nonsensical.
Of course, Mark is going to cue in how much he despises the wheelbarrow economy, but I realize that as a young person,
categorically, I don't have a problem with the people in Tangatanga. The ideology is categorically idiotic.
Okay. I realize that as a young person in this generation, I'm part of the problem, especially just observing from social media the way that we internalize our politics and participate in our politics in the campaigns and the same. If I was looking at this country from the outside, from the perspective of an alien, I would think there are a bunch of jokers, right? What do you think we can borrow from that era back in 2002? Transitioning into 2002, from the way that politics was conducted, from the activism, the music, the language that was spoken during election campaigns, the way that the language that was used to move people, and the way that Kenyans participated to effect change.
I love that question, and the reason I love it is because it's something I have studied for the last almost 7 decades of the existence of our republic. If you look at the 1940s and 50s, the young people were involved, and the songs they were singing were about independence. They were about the African person and the pride of shedding off the shackles of the white person and becoming self-governed and determining our own future. That is, if you talk to any young person at that time, they will tell you, yes, we want an independent country, and they were looking at the benefits of the entire country. Fast forward into the 60s, what were young people doing? They were about education. They were about getting the information so that they could contribute to the building of our nation. That is what drove the people in the 60s and 70s. People were working towards having because there were still Mzungus left over who were in charge of technical issues. Guys were going to engineering school so that they could come out and fill these positions and actually harvest the fruit of independence. At that time, Bichachi was a minister. When he was Minister of Finance, our GDP was growing by 7% in the 60s and 70s. 7% GDP growth back then, my friend, was a miracle. You come into the 80s, and then you have the young people clamoring for what? They were clamoring for a multi-party state. They were clamoring for freedom of speech. They were going on the streets being tear gassed. Some lost their lives to ensure we had the freedom of a democratic space. That is what was driving the younger people. They were obsessed with it. Now, between the 90s to now 2002, what was the clamor? We need to get this autocratic KANU regime out so that we can bring a democratic institution in. So we've got songs like Unbogable. That's what was the theme of the 2002. I am unbogable, I am unmovable. Not from my own pride and my fashion and look at my Instagram account, but I am unbogable because I want to change this country. I want to bring a difference. I want to make an impact. That's what it was about. Post 2002, these same young people, what was the issue? The issue was a new constitution that reflected the hopes and dreams of the Kenyan people. That's what we wanted. So we wanted development, we wanted roads, but now we wanted a new constitution. Notice, in all this journey, these young people considered themselves part of a larger community, and they looked at the government as an avenue to create opportunity for them to do their thing. In the 60s and 70s, for them to get jobs. For the 80s and 90s, for them to be democratic. For the 2000s, to have a constitution that allows them to prosper in the way they have imagined. Then you start Sonko times. Then it became about the individual again. It became about handouts. It became about 500 bobs and 200 bobs. It became now to the extent that they want to be given wheelbarrows. It is nonsensical. You see, if you look at the question that Mwai Kibaki was asked when he became president by the World Bank, and he was asked, what are your poverty elevation mechanisms? He told them, no, we want to talk about wealth creation. We want to talk about changing this economy, and change this economy he did. He finally, we could see roads being built. Finally, we could see institutions that work. Finally, we could see results out of a system. We used to have blackouts for days at a time because Kenya Power was rationing power. Something which is alien today, unless there's a scheduled outage to fix something, we have power all the time. So these things can change. But we need to go back to the philosophy, not of the leaders, of the voters back then. They wanted a government that did what government does, so that they could do what people do.
Right. I want to take us back to the very election and the parties that were involved. They understand that at the time, the late His Excellency Daniel Arap Moi's choice was our now President, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that that's where the idea of state project came from. And you said it was sort of a new dawn for Kenya because for the first time we did not have a KANU-backed president.
Yes.
I'm curious because that's the same argument that the opposition Kenya Kwanza is using to sort of invalidate Honorable Raila's worthiness in becoming the president of this nation. They are claiming that he cannot do it and he cannot do it right because he's a state president. He's a state project, sorry. Why is that argument of state project, why was it valid then and why isn't it valid now as against Honorable Raila?
You know, the question you ask, and it's an important question, needs to be understood in historical terms. So let's start here. In 1991 December, Mwai Kibaki resigned from KANU. He was among the last people to exit KANU and form a party called DP. Now, because Mwai Kibaki quit KANU and ran an election against Matiba, who was number 2, many people argue that he was a state project, that he was selected to go and spoil the votes for Matiba. Right? Now, if you look at the results of the 1992 election, the answer is yes. Okay? And if I was to tell you the intrigues of how Ford was split by KANU and how DP through Mwai Kibaki came to split the votes of Ford even more, so that the opposition lost and KANU won, then you can argue that Kibaki was the most state project of all. Okay, that is one. 2, let us look at this statement, state project. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta was a greenhorn. No one knew him. In fact, when Mwai Kibaki said, Daniel Toroitich Moi said, Nachagua Ijana anaitwa Uhuru, he was like, who's this guy? Who's this fella? I had never seen him.
I read an article, and this is so funny, but apparently back then, Honorable, what's his name, Kalonzo,
yes,
went, and this is what he said: I went into the office and visited His Excellency the late Daniel Arap Moi, and I asked if he could back me or he could endorse me for presidency, and then he said, we have all agreed that we are going to go with Uhuru Kenyatta back then. So
yes,
for a long time, Kalonzo has been in this position. This is not new to him.
Yes. So when Uhuru was introduced, the rest of us were like, who's this fella? We had no idea. Now here's the thing. If Uhuru was a state project, okay, how much of the vote did he get? Kibaki had 67%. Uhuru meaning got 33% of the vote. No one knew him. So a state project has 33% of the votes by Tangatanga's argument before you start an election. Raila Odinga has been running for office since 2007.
Right.
He has never gotten below 43%. So what happens when you add 43 plus 33? So even if you're trying to say he's a state project, you're basically saying he's got 76% of the vote. So it's a dangerous narrative for them, because you are admitting that if the state supports someone, they get an extra 33%. It's a dangerous argument for them. But it is hard to say that Raila is a state project when, number one, the state does not continue to exist as it is beyond the election of a new president. We know very well, for example, Mwai Kibaki fully supported Uhuru Kenyatta. This we know, right? But how many of Mwai Kibaki's people remained in government? The person who's head of state and government remains to be head of state and government. He will make his own choices. It is not a chair in a matatu at watasongeana kwa presidency weke kambao. They sit 2-3 people. No. The person who becomes president will be president sui moto of his own motion. So this idea that a state project somehow is going to extend the power of anyone else is completely unconstitutional. It cannot work. The people who argue that Putin has done it have not read the history of Russia. What Putin did is, when he was president, he had all the power. When he was about to quit being president, he transferred all the power to prime minister. He became prime minister. Then when he was about to finish being prime minister, transferred all the power back to presidency and became president. That is not what is happening constitutionally. And for them to argue and to say that Raila is a state project, they need to remember that Raila has a track record. Raila has a track record. We know where he was in 1992. We know where he stood in repealing Section 2A. We know where William Ruto stood in repealing Section 2A. On that particular historical note, Raila Odinga was right. In 2002, we know where Raila stood. Raila stood with Mwai Kibaki. We know where William Ruto stood. Another election that is critical is the 2010 referendum. We know where Raila Odinga stood. We know where William Ruto stood. Another key moment is the BBI, when the Kikuyus and Luyas wanted extra constituencies because they have got extra people. We know where William Ruto stood. We know where Raila Odinga stood. In the matter of devolving more funds, 35%, to the counties, we know where these two people stand. And it is this kind of questions that matter. But apparently, and this is what I keep reflecting on, even as we are about to inter the body of Mwai Kibaki to rest, I keep reflecting on this one issue. Are the young people going to continue to follow razzmatazz, kujazika na kubambika? Or are they going to actually interrogate policies? Because why the heck are we paying school fees for people who cannot explain a policy when they are going to vote? Why? You know, we should have an IQ test for people before they go to vote.
Listen, we've run out of time, but if you forget nothing, remember this. Are the young people going to follow razzmatazz, kujazika na kubambika? And to leave your comments and opinions in the comment section down below, and catch us next time on The Dive with Mark and me, Murani Gigi.